Hey you guys, thanks for returning for part 2. And thank you for viewing and joining me in part 1, where we got a little information about her background, beginnings, and family. Let's see what else she has in store. When they got married, my parents lived in a small home in Kentwood. My mama was no longer supported by her family, so my parents were very poor. They were young too. My mama was 21 and my father was 23. In 1977, they had my big brother, Brian. When they left that first small place, they bought a little 3-bedroom ranch house. After Brian was born, my mama went back to school to become a teacher. My dad, who worked as a welder at oil refineries, hard jobs that would last a month or sometimes 3, started to drink heavily, and before too long, that was taking its toll on the family. The way my mom tells it, a couple of years into the marriage, my grandfather Barney, my mama's dad, died in a car accident, and in the aftermath, my dad went on a bender, missing Brian's first birthday party. When Brian was a toddler, my dad got drunk at a Christmas party and went AWOL on Christmas morning. That time, my mother said she had enough. She went to stay with Lily. That March of 1980, she filed for divorce. But June and June's new wife begged her to take him back, and she did. For a while, apparently, everything was calm. My dad stopped welding and started a construction business. Then after a lot of struggle, he got a gym business going too. It was called Total Fitness, and it transformed some of the men in town, including my uncles, into bodybuilders. He ran it attached studio space on our property next door to the house. And endless string of muscular men streamed in and out of the gym, flexing their muscles in the mirrors under fluorescent lights. My dad started doing really well. In our little town, he became one of the most well-off men. My family threw backyard crawfish boils. They had crazy parties with dancing all night long. I've always assumed their secret ingredient for staying up all night was speed, since that was the drug of choice back then. My mama opened a daycare center with her sister, my Aunt Sandra. To cement their marriage, my parents had a second baby, me. I was born on December 2nd, 1981. My mama never missed an opportunity to recall that she was in excruciating labor with me for 21 hours. I love the women in my family. My Aunt Sandra, who already had 2 sons, had a surprise baby at 35, my cousin Laura Lynn. Just a few months apart, Laura Lynn and I were like twins. And we were best friends. Laura Lynn was always like a sister to me, and Sandra was a second mother. She was so proud of me and so encouraging. And even though my grandmother Jean was gone long before I was born, I was lucky enough to know her mother, my great-grandmother, Lexi Pierce. Lexi was wicked beautiful, always made up with a white face and red lipstick. She was a badass, more and more as she got older. I was told and had no trouble believing that she'd been married 7 times. 7! Obviously, she disliked her son-in-law, June, but after her daughter, Jean, died, she stuck around and took care of my father and his siblings, and then her great-grandchildren, too. Lexi and I were very close. My most vivid and joyful memories of being a little girl are of time spent with her. We'd have sleepovers, just the 2 of us. At night, we'd go through her makeup cabinet. In the morning, she would make me a huge breakfast. Her best friend, who lived next door, would come over to visit, and we'd listen to slow 1950s ballads from Lexi's record collection. During the day, Lexi and I would even take a nap together. I loved nothing more than drifting off to sleep by her side, smelling her face powder and her perfume, listening as her breathing grew deep and regular. One day, Lexi and I went to rent a movie. As we drove away from the video rental place, she ran into another car, then got stuck in a hole. We couldn't get out. A tow truck had to come rescue us. That accident scared my mama. From then on, I wasn't allowed to hang out with my great-grandmother. It wasn't even a bad accident, I told my mama. I begged to see Lexi. She was my favorite person. No, I'm afraid she's getting senile, my mama said. It's not safe for you to be alone with her anymore. After that, I saw her at my house, but I couldn't get in the car with her or have sleepovers with her ever again. It was a huge loss for me. I didn't understand how being with someone I loved could be considered as dangerous. At that age, my favorite thing to do besides spending time with Lexi was hiding in cabinets. It became like a family joke. Where's Britney now? At my aunt's house, I always disappeared. Everyone would mount a search for me. Just when they'd start to panic, that's when they'd open up a cabinet door and there I'd be. I must have wanted them to look for me. For years, that was my thing, to hide. Hiding was one way I got attention. I also loved dancing and singing. I sang in the choir of our church, and I took dance classes 3 nights a week and on Saturdays. Then I added gymnastic classes, an hour away in Covington, Louisiana. When it came to dancing and singing and acrobatics, I couldn't get enough. At career day in elementary school, I said I was going to be a lawyer, but neighbors and teachers started to say that I was Broadway bound, and eventually I embraced my identity as the little entertainer. I was 3 at my first dance recital and 4 when I sang my first solo, What Child Is This?, for a Christmas program at my mom's daycare. I wanted to hide, but I also wanted to be seen. Both things could be true. Crouched in the cool darkness of a cabinet, I felt so small I could disappear. But with everyone's eyes on me, I became something else. Someone who could command a room. In white tights, belting out a song, I felt like anything was possible. Miss Lynn, the boy shouted. He was out of breath, panting at our front door. You have to come now. One day when I was 4, I was in the living room of our house, sitting on the couch with my mama on the other side, and my friend Cindy on the other.
Oh my God!
Kentwood was like a town in a soap opera. There was always drama. Cindy was chattering away to my mama about the latest scandal while I was listening in, trying to follow along, when the door bursted open. The boy's facial expression was enough for me to know something terrifying had happened. My heart dropped. My mama and I started running. The road had just been repaved, and I was barefoot, running on the hot black tar. Ow, ow, ow! I yelped with every step. I looked down at my feet and saw the tar sticking to them. Finally, we arrived at the field where my brother Brian had been playing with his neighbor friends. They had been trying to mow down some tall grass with their 4-wheelers. This seemed like a fantastic idea to them because they were idiots. Inevitably, they couldn't see one another through the tall grass and had a head-on collision. I must have seen everything. Heard Brian hollering in pain, my mama screaming in fear, but I don't remember any of it. I think God made me black out so I wouldn't remember the pain and panic, or the sight of my brother's crushed body. A helicopter airlifted him to a hospital. When I visited Brian days later, he was in a full body cast. From what I could see, he'd broken nearly every bone in his body. And the detail that drove it all home for me as a kid was he had to pee out of a hole in the cast. The other thing I couldn't help but notice was that The whole room was filled with toys. My parents were so grateful that he survived, and they felt so bad for him that during his recovery, every day was like Christmas. My mama catered to my brother because of guilt. She still defers to him to this day. It's funny how one split second can change a family's dynamics forever. The accident made me much closer to my brother. Our bond was formed out of my sincere, genuine recognition of his pain. Once he came home from the hospital, I wouldn't leave his side. I slept beside him every night. He couldn't sleep in his own bed because he still had the full body cast. So he had a special bed, and they had to set it up, a little mattress for me at the foot of it. Sometimes I'd climb up into his bed and just hold him. Once the cast came off, I continued to share the bed with him for years. Even as a very little girl, I knew that between the accident and how hard my dad was on him, my brother had a difficult life. I wanted to bring him comfort. Finally, after years of this, my mama told me, "Britney, now you're almost in the 6th grade. You need to start sleeping by yourself." I said no. I was such a baby. I didn't want to sleep by myself, but she insisted, and I finally had to give in. Once I started to stay in my own room, I came to enjoy my own space, but I remained extremely close with my brother. He loved me, and I loved him so much. For him, I felt the most endearing, protective love. I didn't want him ever to be hurt. I'd seen him suffer too much already. As my brother got better, we became heavily involved with the community. Since it was a small town of just a couple thousand people, everyone came out to support the 3 main parades a year: Mardi Gras, 4th of July, Christmas. The whole town looked forward to them. The streets would be lined up with people smiling, waving, leaving behind the drama of their lives for a day to have fun watching their neighbors slowly wander by on Highway 38. One year, a bunch of kids decided to decorate a golf cart and put it in the Mardi Gras parade. There were probably 8 kids in that golf cart, way too many, obviously. There was 3 on the bench seat, a couple standing on the sides holding onto the little roof, and 1 or 2 swinging from the back. It was so heavy that the tires of the cart were almost flat. We all wore 19th century costumes. I can't even remember why. I was sitting on the laps of the bigger kids and waving to everybody. The problem was, with that many kids in a golf cart and its flat tires, the thing got hard to control, and with the laughing and the waving and the excited energy, well, we only hit the car ahead of us a few times. But that was enough for us to get expelled from the parade. When my father started drinking heavily again, his businesses started to fail. The stress of having no money was compounded by the chaos of my father's extreme mood swings. I was particularly scared to get in the car with my dad because he would talk to himself while he was driving. I couldn't understand the words he was saying. He seemed to be in his own world. I knew even then that my father had reasons for wanting to lose himself in drinking. He was stressed out by work. Now, I see even more clearly that he was self-medicating after enduring years of abuse at the hands of his father, June. At the time, though, I had no idea why he was so hard on us, why nothing we did seemed to be quite good enough for him. The saddest part to me was that I always wanted just a dad who would love me as I was, someone who would say, "I just love you. You could do anything right now. I'd still love you unconditionally." My dad was reckless, cold, and mean with me. But he was even harder on Brian. He pushed him so hard to do well in sports that it was just cruel. Brian's life in those years was much rougher than mine because our father put him through the same brutal regimen June had pushed on him. Brian was forced to do basketball and also football, even though he wasn't built for it. My dad could also be abusive with my mama, but he was more the type of a drinker who would go away for days at a time. To be honest, it was a kindness to us when he would actually go away. I preferred it when he wasn't there. What made his time at home especially bad was that my mama would argue with him all night long. He was so drunk he couldn't talk. I don't know if he could even hear her, but we could. Brian and I had to suffer the consequences of her rage, which meant not being able to sleep throughout the night. Her screaming voice would echo throughout the house. I'd storm out into the living room in my nightgown and beg her, just feed him and go put him to bed. He's sick. She was arguing with this person who wasn't even conscious, but she wouldn't listen. I would go back to bed furious, staring daggers at the ceiling, listening to her yell, cursing her in my heart. Isn't that awful? He was the one who was drunk. He was the one whose alcoholism had made us so poor. He was the one passed out in the chair, but she was the one who ended up pissing me off the most, because at least in those moments, he was quiet. I was so desperate to sleep, and she wouldn't shut up. In spite of all the nightly drama by day, my mom made our home a place my friends wanted to come to. At least when my father respected us enough to drink somewhere else. All the kids from the neighborhood came over. Our house was, for the lack of a better word, the cool house. We had a high bar with 12 chairs around it. My mama was a typical young Southern mama, often gossiping, always smoking cigarettes with her friends at the bar. She smoked Virginia Slims, the same cigarettes I smoke now, or talking with them on the phone. I was dead to all of them. The older kids would sit on the bar chairs in front of the TV and play video games. I was the youngest one. I didn't know how to play video games, so I always had to fight to get the older kids' attention. Our house was a zoo. I was always dancing on the coffee table for attention, and my mama was always chasing after Brian when he was a little, jumping over couches, trying to catch him so he could get spanked after talking back to her. He was a little pain. I was always overly excited, trying to draw other older kids' eyes away from the screen in the living room, or to get the adults to stop talking to one another in the kitchen. "Britney, stop!" my mama would yell. "We have company. Just be nice. Be on good behavior." But I ignored her, and I would always find a way to get everyone's attention. I was quiet and small, but when I sang, I came alive, and I had taken enough gymnastic classes to be able to move well. When I was 5, I entered a local dance competition. My talent was a dance routine done wearing a top hat and twirling a cane. I won. Then my mama started taking me around to contests all over the region. In old photos and videos, I'm wearing the most ridiculous things. In my 3rd grade musical, I wore a baggy purple t-shirt with a huge purple bow on top of my head that made me look like a Christmas present. It was absolutely horrible. I worked my way through the talent circuit, winning a regional contest in Baton Rouge. Before too long, my parents set their sights on bigger opportunities than what we could accomplish picking up prizes in school gymnastics. When they saw an advertisement in the newspaper for an open call for the all-new Mickey Mouse Club, they suggested we go. We drove 8 hours to Atlanta. There were more than 2,000 kids there. I had to stand out, especially once we learned after we arrived that they were only looking for kids over age of 10. When the casting director, a man named Matt Casella, asked me how old I was, I opened my mouth to say 8. Then I remembered the age 10 cutoff and said, "Oh, 9. He looked at me skeptically. For an audition, I sang Sweet Georgia Brown while doing a dance routine, adding in some gymnastic flips. They narrowed the group of thousands from across the country down to a handful of kids, including a beautiful girl from California, a few years older than me, named Carrie Russell, a girl from Pennsylvania named Christina Aguilera. Both of us were told we hadn't made the cut, but that we were talented. Matt said we could probably get on the show once we were a little older and more experienced. He told my mama that he thought we should go to New York City to work. He recommended we look up an agent that he liked who helped young performers get started in theater. We didn't go right away. Instead, for about 6 months, I stayed in Louisiana and went to work, waiting tables at Lexi's seafood restaurant, Granny's Seafood and Deli, to help out. The restaurant had a terrible fishy smell. Still, the food was amazing, unbelievably good. And it became the new hangout for all the kids. The deli's back room was where my brother and all his friends would get drunk in high school. Meanwhile, out on the floor, at age 9, I was cleaning shellfish and serving plates of food while doing my prissy dancing in my cute little outfit. My mama sent footage of me to an agent that Matt had recommended. Her name was Nancy Carson. In the video, I was singing Shine On Harvest Moon. It worked. She asked us to come to New York to meet her. After I sang for Nancy in her office, 20 stories up in a building in Midtown Manhattan, we got back on the Amtrak and headed home. I had been officially signed by a talent agency. Not long after we got back to Louisiana, my little sister Jamie Lynn was born. Laura Lynn and I spent hours playing with her in the playhouse, like she was another one of our dolls. A few days after she came home with the baby, I was getting ready for a dance competition when my mama started acting strangely. She was hand sewing up a rip in my costume, but while working the needle and thread, she just up and threw the costume away. She didn't seem to know what she was doing. The costume was a piece of shit, frankly, but I needed it to compete. Mama, why'd you throw my costume away? I said. Then all of a sudden, there was blood. Blood everywhere. Something hadn't been sewn up properly after she gave birth. She was gushing blood. I screamed for my father. What's wrong with her? I yelled. What is wrong with her? Daddy rushed in and drove her to the hospital. The whole way I kept screaming. Something cannot be wrong with my mama. I was 9. To see a river of blood flowing out of your mama would be traumatic for anyone. But for a child at that age, it was terrifying. I had never seen that much blood before. Once we got back to the doctor, they fixed her in what felt like 2 seconds. No one even seemed that concerned. Apparently, postpartum hemorrhaging isn't that uncommon, but it lodged forever in my memory. At gymnastics class, I'd always check to make sure my mama was on the other side of the window waiting for me to be done. It was like a reflex or something. I had to do it to feel safe, but one day I did my usual check-in out the window and she wasn't there. I panicked. She left. She was gone. Maybe forever? I started crying. I fell to my knees, seeing me. You thought someone had died or something. My teacher rushed over to comfort me. Honey, she's going to come back, she said. It's okay. She probably just went to Walmart. Turned out that my mama had done exactly just that. She had gone to Walmart. But it was not okay. I couldn't take her leaving. Seeing how upset I was when she got back, she never left that window during class again. And for the next few years, she never left my side. I was a little girl with big dreams. I wanted to be a star like Madonna, Dolly Parton, or Whitney Houston. I had simpler dreams too. Dreams that seemed even harder to achieve and felt too ambitious to stay out loud. I wanted my dad to stop drinking. I wanted my mom to stop yelling. I wanted everybody to be okay. With my family, anything could go wrong at any time. I I had no power there. Only while performing, I was truly invincible. Standing in a Manhattan conference room in front of a woman who could make my dreams come true, at least one thing was completely within my control. When I was 10, I was invited to be a contestant on Star Search. On the first show I did was a spunky version of a song I heard sung by Judy Garland, I Don't Care. I got a 3.75 stars. My rival, a girl who sang opera, got 3.5. I advanced to the next round. The next episode taped later that day, and I was up against a bolo tie wearing boy with a lot of hairspray in his hair named Marty Thomas, age 12. We were friendly. We even played basketball together before the show. I sang the Judds' Love Can Build a Bridge, which I'd sung the year before at my aunt's wedding. While we were waiting for our scores, Marty and I were interviewed on stage by the host, Ed McMahon. I noticed last week, you have the most adorable, pretty eyes, he said to me. Do you have a boyfriend? No, sir. Why not? They're mean. Boyfriends? Ed said. You mean all boys are mean? I'm not mean. How about me? Well, it depends, I said. I get that a lot, Ed said. I got 3.75 again. Marty got a perfect 4. I smiled and hugged him politely, and as I walked off, Ed wished me luck. I kept it together until I made it backstage, but then I just bursted into tears. Afterwards, my mama got me a hot fudge sundae. My mama and I kept flying back and forth to New York. The intensity of working in the city as a little girl was exciting for me, even if it was also intimidating. I got offered a job, an understudy role, in the off-Broadway musical Ruthless, inspired by the Bad Seed, All About Eve, Mam and Gypsy. I played a psychopathic child star named Tina Denmark. Tina's first song was called Born to Entertain. It hit real close to home. The other understudy was a talented young actress named Natalie Portman. While I was doing the show, we rented a little apartment for my mama, baby Jamie Lynn, and me near my public school, the Professional Performing Arts School. And I took classes nearby at Broadway Dance Center, but mostly I passed my time at the Players Theater downtown. The experience was a validation in some way, proof I had enough talent to make it in the theatrical world. But it was a grueling schedule. There was no time to be a regular kid or make friends, because I had to work nearly every day. Even Saturdays were 2 shows. I also didn't love being an understudy. I had to be at the theater every night until as late as midnight in case I had to take over for the main Tina, Laura Bell Bundy. After a few months, she left and I took over the lead. But I was awfully worn out. By the time Christmas came around, I desperately wanted to go home. And then I learned I was supposed to perform on Christmas Day. In tears, I asked my mama, "Am I really going to do this on Christmas?" I looked at the little mini tree in our apartment thinking about the sturdy evergreen we'd have in our living room back home in Kentwood. In my little girl mind, I didn't understand why I'd want to do this. Continue performing through the holiday? So I quit the show and went home. The schedule of New York City theater was just too rough on me at that age. One good thing did come out of it, though. I learned how to sing in a theater with small acoustics. The audience is right beside you, just 200 people in the room. Honestly, it's strange, but in that space, the feeling of singing is more electric. The closeness that you feel with the people in the audience is so special. Their energy made me stronger. With the experience under my belt, I auditioned again for the Mickey Mouse Club. Waiting to hear back from the Mickey Mouse Club back in Kentwood, attending Park Lane Academy, I became a basketball point guard. I was tiny for 11, but I could run the plays. People imagined I was a cheerleader, but I never was. I danced a little bit on the side, but at school I wanted to play basketball. So I did, in spite of my height. I had this huge number 25 jersey, way too big for me. I was a little bitty mouse zipping around out there. I had a crush for a while on a basketball player who was 15 or 16. He made every three-pointer, and he made it look so easy. People would come from far away to see him play, just like they did with my dad. He was good. Not as good as my dad, but still a genius with the ball. I marveled at him and my friends who were taller than me. My thing was to steal the ball away from the opposing player, mid-dribble, run down, and make a layup. I loved the thrill of quickly weaving around the other team. Just the rush of no script, the play being unpredictable, completely unknown, made me feel alive. I was so small and so sweet that no one saw it coming. It wasn't the same as being on stage in New York City, but under the bright lights on that court, waiting for the sound of applause, it felt like the next best thing. My second audition for Mickey Mouse Club got me booked. Matt, the nice casting director who had referred my mom to our agent Nancy, decided I was ready. Being in the show was boot camp for the entertainment industry. There were extensive dance rehearsals, singing lessons, acting lessons, time in the recording studio, and school in between. The Mouseketeers quickly split into their own cliques, divided by dressing rooms that were shared. Christina Aguilera and I were the young kids, and we shared a dressing room together with another girl, Nikki DeLoach. We looked up to the older kids, Kerry Russell, Ryan Gosling, and Tony Lucca, who I thought was so handsome. And quickly I connected with a boy named Justin Timberlake. We were shooting at Disney World in Orlando, and my mama and Jamie Lynn, who at the time was 2 years old, had come along with me. During the day, for our breaks, the cast would go on rides and goof off. It was honestly a kid's dream, unbelievably fun, particularly for a kid like me. But it was also exceptionally hard work. We would run choreography like 30 times in a day, trying to get every step perfect. The only bad moment was when, not long ago into filming, we got a call that my grandmother Lily had died. Because of a heart attack or stroke, she drowned in the pool while swimming. We couldn't afford to fly home for the funeral, but Lynn Harless, Justin's kind mother, lent us the plane fare. It was something family would do, and the kids and parents on that show became family. One day, Tony was looking for a hat that a wardrobe person had left in the girls' room, and he came into our dressing room. He walked in, and my heart fell out of my chest. He was my crush. I couldn't believe the guy had just walked into my dressing room. My little heart just went to the floor. Another time in a sleepover, we played a game of Truth or Dare, and someone dared Justin to kiss me. A Janet Jackson song was playing in the background as he leaned in and kissed me. It took me back to a moment in the library when I was in 3rd grade, holding a guy's hand for the first time. It was the biggest deal to me, so real, so powerful. That was the first time somebody had paid me any sort of romantic attention, and it felt like a wonderful rebellion. The lights were off, we'd been watching a movie, and we'd hide our hands underneath the desk so the teachers couldn't see. The Mickey Mouse Club was a terrific experience. It got my feet wet in TV. Performing on the show ignited me. From then on, I knew I wanted to do what I did there, singing and dancing. When the show ended a year and a half later, a lot of my castmates were going off to New York or Los Angeles to continue chasing their dreams. But I decided to go back to Kentwood. Already within me was a push-pull part of me that wanted to keep building towards the dream, but the other part wanted to live a normal life in Louisiana. For a minute, I had to let normalcy win. Back at home, I returned to Park Lane, settling into normal teenage life, or the closest thing to normal that was possible for my family. For fun, starting when I was in 8th grade, my mom and I would make the 2-hour drive from Kentwood to Biloxi, Mississippi, and while we were there, we would drink daiquiris. We called our cocktails toddies. I love that I was able to drink with my mom every now and then. The way we drank was nothing like my father did. When he drank, he grew more depressed and shut down. We became happier and alive and adventurous. Some of my best times with my mama were those trips we took to the beach with my sister. As we'd drive, I'd sip on a little bitty White Russian. To me, the drink tasted like ice cream. When it had the perfect amount of shaved ice and cream and sugar and not too much alcohol, that was my piece of heaven. My sister and I had matching bathing suits and matching perms. Now, today it's basically illegal to give a little kid a perm, but back in the 90s, it was just cute as hell. At 3, Jamie Lynn was a living doll, the craziest, most adorable child ever. So that was our thing. We'd go to Biloxi, drink, go to the beach, come back happy. And we had fun. We had a lot of fun. Even amid all the darkness, there was still a lot of joy in my childhood. By 13, I was drinking with my mom and smoking with my friends. I had my first cigarette at my one bad friend's house. All my other friends were geeks, but this friend was popular. Her sister was a senior, and she always had the best makeup, and guys were all over her. She took me out to a shed and handed me my first cigarette. Even though it was just tobacco, I felt high. I remember thinking, am I going to die? Is this feeling ever going to go away? When is it going to go away? Once I survived my first cigarette, I immediately wanted another one. I did a pretty good job hiding my habit from my mama, but one day she had me drive us home from the store along the long road that led to our house. I started driving at 13 when suddenly she started sniffing the air. "I smell smoke," she said. "Have you been smoking?" She grabbed one of my hands off the wheel fast and pulled it towards her to smell. As she did that, I lost control of the wheel and the car spun off the road. It felt like everything was moving in slow motion. I looked back and saw little Jamie Lynn pressed backward into her seat. She had on a seatbelt, but she wasn't in a car seat. As we spun what felt like very slowly, I kept thinking, we're gonna die. We're gonna die. We're gonna die. Then wham! The butt of the car hit a telephone pole. Hitting the way we did was a miracle. If we'd hit the pole going forward, we would have gone through the windshield. My mama jumped out of the car and just started yelling at me for crashing, at the cars passing by for help, at the world for just letting this happen. No one was hurt, fortunately. All 3 of us walked away. Even better, my mama forgot all about how she caught me smoking. The crime of teenage me smoking? Whatever. We almost died. After that, she never mentioned it again. One day, some of the boys in the 6th grade at school asked me to go smoke a cigarette in the locker room during break. I was the only girl they ever asked to join them. I've never felt cooler. Fortunately, the boys' locker room had doors, one of which led to the outside. I remember we jammed the door open so the smoke could escape and we wouldn't get caught. It became a ritual, but it didn't last. A little while later, I tried to do it on my own, without the boys. This time, my best girlfriend and I went to smoke in the girls' locker room. But that room only had one door. Disaster. We got caught red-handed and we were sent to the principal's office. "Were you smoking?" the principal asked. "No," I said. My best friend reached down and secretly pinched my hand so hard. It was clear the principal didn't believe me, but guess what? Somehow we actually got away with a warning. Later, my friend said, "I swear to God, Britney, you're the worst liar I've ever seen in my life. Let me do the talking next time, please." I wasn't just drinking and smoking by that age. I was precocious when it came. I had a huge crush on one of the guys who was always hanging around my bad friend's house. He was 18 or 19, and he had a girlfriend at the time, a tomboy. They were really together, like the it couple at our school. I wished he'd look at me, but I didn't have much hope, given that I was 5 years younger than him. But one night, I was sleeping over that bad friend's house when, no warning, the guy I had a crush on snuck into the house in the middle of the night. It must have been like 3 a.m. I was sleeping on the couch and I woke up to him next to me. He started kissing me, and then we were like fully making out on the couch. What is happening? I thought. It was like some sort of like seance, like I conjured him. I couldn't believe my crush had just appeared out of nowhere and started making out with me. And, well, it was sweet. That was all he did, was kiss me. He didn't try anything else. That year, I liked a lot of boys in my brother's crowd. As a kid, Brian was funny, weird, in the best way. But when he was a senior, he became king of the school, an absolute badass. His senior year, I started dating his best friend, and I lost my virginity to him. I was younger for the 9th grade, and the guy was 17. My relationship with him ended up consuming a lot of my time. I would go to school like normal at 7 a.m., but leave at lunchtime around 1 p.m. and spend the afternoon with him. Then he would drive me back to school as I was supposedly getting out. I'd just innocently get on the bus and go home like nothing happened. Eventually, my mama got a call from the school's office that I'd missed 17 days, which I had to make up. My mama said, "How did you do it? How did you just leave?" "Oh, I forged your signature." The age difference between me and that guy was huge, obviously. Now it seems outrageous. And so my brother, who was always very protective, started to hate him. When Brian caught me sneaking out to go to visit his friend, he told on me to our parents. As punishment, I had to walk around the neighborhood all day with a bucket, cleaning up garbage like a prisoner on the highway. Brian followed me around, taking pictures as I was crying, picking up trash. Moments like that aside, well, there was something so beautifully normal about that period of my life. Going to homecoming and prom, driving around in our little town, going to the movies. But the truth was, I missed performing. My mama had been in touch with a lawyer she'd met on my audition circuit, a man named Larry Rudolph, who she would call sometimes for business advice. She sent him videos of me singing, and he suggested I record a demo. He had a song that Toni Braxton had recorded for her second album that had ended up on the cutting room floor. It was called Today. He sent me the song and I learned it. Then I recorded it at a studio an hour and a half away from us in New Orleans. This would become the demo that I would use to get in the door at record labels. Around the time, Justin and another Mouseketeer, JC Chazez, were in a new boy band called NSYNC that was being assembled. Another castmate, Nikki, with whom I shared that dressing room with, was joining a girl group. But after I talked it over with my mama, we decided to pursue the solo avenue instead. Larry played the demo for some executive in New York who told him they wanted to see what I could do. So I put on my little itty bitty heels and my cute little dress, and I returned to New York. I had tried to go back to being an ordinary teenager, but it just hadn't worked. I still wanted something more. Who is this man, I thought? I have no idea, but I like his office and I really like his dog. He was just this little old man, but his energy was insane. I estimated that he was probably 65 years old. He was actually in his 50s. Larry had told me that the man was a big contact named Clive Clatter. I had no idea what he did. If I'd known going in that he was a record executive who'd founded Jive Records, maybe I would have been more nervous. Instead, I was just curious, and I loved him from the second I met him. He had an incredible, intimidating 3-story office, and in the office was a teacup terrier, a kind of dog I didn't even know existed. That was, I swear to God, the smallest, most precious thing. When I walked in and saw that office and that dog, I felt like I was entering a parallel universe. Eventually, everything opened up into a different dimension. I walked into an amazing dream. "Hi, Britney," he said, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "How are you?" He acted like he was part of some sort of powerful secret society. He had a South African accent that made it sound to me like he was a character in an old movie. I'd never heard anyone talk like that in my entire life. He let me pick up his dog as I held the tiny little animal so warm in my arms and looked around at the giant office. I couldn't stop smiling. In that moment, my dreams got a big jump start. I hadn't recorded anything yet other than the demo. I was just visiting these people Larry had told me to meet with. I knew I was supposed to go sing a song for a record label executive, and I knew I sure wanted to be around that guy more, and that the way he was had something to do with the way I wanted to be. I couldn't have been surprised if he'd been my uncle in the past life. I wanted to always know him. It was his smile. Clever, smart, wise. He was a mystical smile of a man. I'll never forget it. I feel so much joy with him, and I felt like the whole trip to New York was more than worthwhile, even if all it gave me was the chance to meet someone like that, someone who believed in me. But my day wasn't done. Larry took me around town, and I went into rooms full of executives and sang Whitney Houston's "I Have Nothing, 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 I Don't Have You." Gazing out at the rooms full of men in suits, looking me up and down in my small dress and high heels, I sang loud. Clive signed me right away. And so I ended up getting a record deal with Jive Records at the age of 15. My mother was teaching second grade now in Kentwood, and Jamie Lynn was little. So we got our family friend Felicia Culata, I like to call her Miss Fee, to come with me everywhere. The label wanted me in the studio immediately. They put Fee and me in an apartment in New York. We would drive to New Jersey every day, and I would go into a booth and sing for the producer and songwriter Eric Foster White, who'd worked with Whitney Houston. Honestly, I was clueless. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I loved to sing, I loved to dance, and so whichever of the gods could come down and coordinate that for me, I was going to show up for them. If anyone was able to put something together for me that presented me in a format where people could relate to, I was ready. I don't know what happened, but God worked his magic, and there I was in New Jersey, recording. The booth I sang in was underground. When you're inside it, you just hear yourself sing, nothing else. I did that for months. I never came out of the booth. After working nonstop, I went to a barbecue at someone's house. I was very girly at the time, always in a dress and heels. I was there talking with people, trying to make good impressions, and at one point I ran to go get Felicia and bring her out on the balcony. I didn't realize that there was a screen door. I ran straight right into it, hit it with my nose, and fell back. Everyone looked up and saw me on the floor, holding my nose. When I tell you I was embarrassed, I swear to God. I got up, and someone said, "You know there's a screen there." "Yeah, thanks," I said. Of course, everyone just laughed their little fannies off. I was so embarrassed. Isn't it funny that out of all the things that happened to me in the first year of recording, that is one of my most vivid memories. That was over 25 years ago. I was devastated, but honestly, I think I was more in shock because I did not know that the screen was there. It made me think I might have been recording in that booth a little too long. About a year into my time in New Jersey, things were coming together for my first album. Then all of a sudden, one of the executives told me, "You need to meet this producer from Sweden. He's really good. He writes cool songs." "All right," I said. "Who has he worked with?" I don't know exactly how I knew to ask that question, inexperienced as I was, but I started to have a clear idea about how I wanted to sound. I did a little bit of research too, and learned that at that point he'd done songs for the Backstreet Boys, Robin, and Bryan Adams. Yes, I said it. Let's do it. Max Martin flew to New York, and we had dinner meeting, just me and him with no assistants or label. Though I usually had handlers around because of my age, in this case, they wanted me to meet him by myself. As we sat down, a waiter came over and said, "How may I help you?"
Can I take your order?
Somehow a candle flipped over and sent the whole table up in flames. We were at one of the most expensive restaurants in New York City, and our table had just become a wall of fire. From "How may I help you?" to flame wall in a second. Max and I looked at each other in horror. "We should go now, yeah?" he said. He was magic, and we started working together. I flew to Sweden to record songs, but I barely registered the difference between there and New Jersey. I was just in another booth. Felicia would come in and say, "Do you want some coffee? Let's go take a break." I would shake her off. I would work for hours straight. My work ethic was so strong. I would never come out. If you knew me then, you wouldn't hear from me for days. I would stay in the studio as long as I could. If anyone wanted to leave, I'd say I wasn't perfect. The night before was recorded, Baby One More Time. I was listening to the Soft Cell's Tainted Love and fell in love with that sound. I stayed up late so that I can go into the studio tired, my voice fried. It worked. When I sang, it came out gravelly in a way that sounded more mature and sexier. Once I felt that was happening, I became so focused on recording, and Max listened to me. When I said I wanted more R&B in my voice, less straight pop, he knew what I meant and he made it happen. Then, when all the songs were done, someone said, "What else can you do? Do you want to dance now?" I said, "Do I want to dance? Hell yeah, I do!" Thank you so much for listening, and come back to join us for part 3. I'm Leenda, and that's for the record, Your Honor.